Greetings everyone, my name is Gigi and this is Let's Build, wherein I build a Lego set timed to different media and talk about the facts concerning the topic of the build. Today's build is the Lego Super Mario Game Boy versus Super Mario Land for the Game Boy. All footage I'm using is for science, educational, and research purposes. My content is transformative and protected under fair use. All footage is time-lapse with commentary. I apologize in advance for pronouncing any names or places incorrectly. Spoilers ahead, you have been warned. Specifications for the Lego set. Recapture the excitement you felt when you first played on the Game Boy with this Lego model building kit for adults. A fantastic gift for fans of Nintendo video games, the collectible set features a near 1-to-1 scale brick-built replica of the original Game Boy handheld game system from Nintendo. Press the plus control pad, A and B buttons, and select and start, just like on the real system. And the model has other iconic Game Boy details, including the contrast adjustment and volume dial and the Game Pak slot. Customize your play with interchangeable brick-built The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, or Super Mario Land, Game Boy Game Paks, and corresponding lenticular screens, or the Nintendo Start screen. Place your creation on the buildable display stand for a complete nostalgic display. Find step-by-step instructions for this Nintendo Lego display set in the box or on the Lego Builder app. The set contains 421 pieces. Lego Model Building Kit for Adults. Inspire memories of classic video games with this near 1-to-1 scale replica model of the original Game Boy handheld game system from Nintendo. Authentic details. You can recreate the plus control pad, A and B buttons, select and start, the contrast adjustment and volume dial, and the Game Pak slot, and display your brick-built Game Boy on a stand. A joyful build. The set offers an immersive activity for experienced Lego builders and includes step-by-step instructions so Game Boy fans who are Lego newcomers can also enjoy the challenge. Customize your display. Includes interchangeable brick-built The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, or Super Mario Land Game Boy Game Paks, the lenticular screens, plus a Nintendo Start screen. Nostalgic Nintendo-themed gift for video game lovers. Treat yourself, or give this exciting adults Lego building set to gamers who are fans of Super Mario or The Legend of Zelda. Nintendo-themed collectible. This Lego build and display model is part of a large assortment of Lego sets for adults designed for people who enjoy hands-on creative activities to relax. Dimensions. The buildable Lego Nintendo system in this 421-piece set measures over 5.5 inches high, 3.5 inches wide, and 1 inch deep. Has no light, sound, or digital play functions. The instruction booklet starts out with a diagram showing the buttons and features just like an actual Game Boy manual. Thank you for selecting the Lego Game Boy. Caution: clicking the power switch may result in acute feelings of nostalgia. Insert to continue. This authentic Lego Game Boy has been constructed using the finest materials to appeal to you, the discerning retro gamer. For the full 1989 experience, insert the Game Pak cartridge and realistic lenticular screen and ignore repeated calls to come downstairs for your dinner. Handheld history. Upon its launch in Japan in 1989, the original Game Boy was considered a revolution in video gaming. The powerful, portable console allowed video game fans to enjoy their favorite games on the go, with a battery life that lasted up to a whole day. Our designers, very much fans themselves, have lovingly recreated this iconic form so that you can own an authentic piece of handheld history. Batteries not included. It's what's inside that counts. Sure, the iconic casing may be the star of the show, but we showed just as much love to the interior of both the Lego Game Boy and Game Paks, obsessing over detail and color for that authentic feel. I love watching people use the power switch. When they feel that snap, it always takes them back to that Game Boy realm. Lego Game Boy lead designer Carl Merriam. Super Mario Land. One giant leap. With appearances in numerous NES, arcade, and Game & Watch titles, Mario was no stranger to the world when he jumped onto the Game Boy for the first time in Super Mario Land. Launched alongside the Game Boy's release in 1989, the game sees Mario explore a whole new world called Sarasa Land as he attempts to rescue Princess Daisy in her debut appearance. The responsibility to translate the much-loved platform-based gameplay from the more powerful NES to the small screen fell to the same team developing the Game Boy itself, giving them precious insights on the console's potential. They couldn't have fared better. Critics and fans alike agreed that it was a giant leap forward for a handheld title, with 12 expertly plotted levels packed with original enemies and a devilish expert mode for seasoned gamers. It's still considered a classic. Lynx Awakening. Small screen, big adventure. Released in 1993, 4 years after the Game Boy's launch, Link's Awakening was the small screen debut for the already popular Zelda franchise. Adored by fans for its emotionally driven, story-based gameplay, with wonderfully creative puzzles and challenges, this was the first Zelda title to be set outside of the Kingdom of Hyrule, and the first not to feature Princess Zelda. In Link's Awakening, the titular character is stranded on an island. His only chance of escape is to awaken the mythical windfish by collecting magical musical instruments. Its place in the hearts and minds of gamers of all ages all over the world remains to this day. The Game Boy is a handheld game console developed and marketed by Nintendo. It was released in Japan on April 21, 1989, in North America on July 1, 1989, and in Europe on September 28, 1990. Nintendo's first handheld to use ROM cartridges, it succeeded the Game & Watch line of handheld electronic games and competed with Sega's Game Gear, Atari's Lynx, and NEC's TurboExpress in the fourth generation of video game consoles. Nintendo Research and Development 1, under Gunpei Yokoi and Satoru Okada, designed the Game Boy. To expand the single game Game & Watch, Nintendo adopted a dot matrix display and interchangeable game cartridges. They prioritized affordability, battery life, and durability over the faster processors and color graphics of its competitors, following Yokoi's philosophy of using mature, low-cost technology. The Game Boy has a monochromatic display and an 8-bit processor. It retains the Game & Watch D-pad and the Game Link cable, developed by Okada, which enables multiplayer connectivity and data transfer. In North America and Europe, the Game Boy was backed by a large marketing campaign and bundled with Tetris, which increased its appeal beyond traditional video game audiences. Although its monochromatic display and technical limitations drew criticism, the Game Boy's low price, long battery life, and extensive game library drove strong sales worldwide. The success of Nintendo's Pokémon series helped maintain its popularity late into the 90s. Nintendo released multiple redesigns, including the smaller Game Boy Pocket in '96 and the Japan-exclusive backlit Game Boy Light from 1998. Nintendo continued to support the Game Boy following the 1998 release of the Game Boy Color. The Game Boy was forward-compatible with many GBC games, while the GBC and its 2001 successor, the Game Boy Advance, are backwards compatible with Game Boy games. The Game Boy and GBC sold an estimated 118.69 million combined. They were the best-selling console at the time of their discontinuation in 2003, and remain the fourth best-selling console as of 2025. Journalists credit the Game Boy with establishing handheld gaming as a mass market category and for introducing video games to a generation of players. History and development. The Game Boy was designed by Nintendo Research and Development 1, R&D 1, the team behind the Mario Bros. And Donkey Kong arcade games and the successful Game & Watch series of handhelds, which helped stabilize Nintendo financially. By 1983, while Game & Watch remained popular internationally, sales in Japan had begun to decline, pressuring R&D 1 to innovate. At the same time, they faced competition from Nintendo Research and Development 2, R&D 2, an in-house rival created by Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi. That same year, R&D 2 had launched the family computer, intensifying the pressure on R&D 1. Looking to improve Game & Watch, R&D 1 researched new screens from supplier Sharp, including dot matrix displays that could support multiple games, unlike Game & Watch, which used pre-printed segmented LCDs, limiting each device to a single game. Start of development. On June 10, 1987, Division Director Gunpei Yokoi informed R&D 1 that Yamauchi wanted a successor to Game & Watch priced under 10,000 yen. From the very first meeting, the team knew that they wanted to use a dot matrix display and codenamed the project Dot Matrix Game, or DMG, a name later reflected in the Game Boy's official model number, DMG-01. Within R&D 1, Yokoi championed lateral thinking with withered technology, a design philosophy which eschewed cutting-edge technology in favor of finding innovative uses for mature technologies, which tended to be more affordable and reliable. This led to early clashes between Yokoi and his assistant director, Satoru Okada. Yokoi envisioned a simple toy akin to an advanced Game & Watch, while Okada pushed for a more powerful system with interchangeable cartridges, essentially a portable NES. Some within R&D 1 believed Yokoi resisted the idea simply to avoid links to the NES, developed by their rivals at R&D 2. Eventually, in a heated meeting, Yokoi relented, approving Okada's vision and giving him full responsibility for the project. Choosing the hardware. Initially, R&D 1 considered using a Ricoh CPU, similar to the NES, for potential compatibility. However, R&D 2, then building the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, blocked this, claiming it would strain Ricoh's resources. R&D 1 suspected this was simply an attempt to hinder their project. Ultimately, they opted for a Sharp CPU. A key side effect of this choice was the CPU's built-in communication feature. In the early 1980s, Okada had worked on an earlier Nintendo project called Computer Mahjong Yakuman that featured multiplayer gaming over a cable connection between two devices. He saw an opportunity to implement a similar feature. Despite skepticism from his team that the feature would be too difficult to use, he personally developed the Game Link cable technology, which later enabled Pokémon's battle and trade game mechanics. The Game Boy also retained a key innovation from Game & Watch, the D-pad. Yokoi had designed it as a compact alternative to joysticks, making it ideal for handheld devices. Its use on the NES controller also helped ease the transition for players. Early in development, R&D 1 evaluated dot matrix displays from Sharp but found them unsuitable due to severe ghosting. Seeking alternatives, they approached Citizen, Epson, Poseidon, Matsushita, and Seiko. Most declined, but Citizen, already producing LCDs for portable TVs, was eager to collaborate. The team was impressed by Citizen's chip-on-glass technology, which integrated the screen controller into display, reducing the cost and production time. They offered Nintendo a monochrome screen for 1,300 yen, or a color version for 3,900 yen. However, following Yokoi's philosophy, the team rejected color due to higher power consumption and cost, opting for a simple grayscale screen without a backlight. This decision proved wise, as competing color handhelds would suffer from poor battery life, giving the Game Boy a significant advantage. However, Sharp was still an important partner, so Nintendo asked if they could match Citizen on technology and price. Sharp responded with vague answers on their screen technologies and quoted a price of 2,500 yen to 3,000 yen per screen. In response, Citizen lowered its price to 1,000 yen. With Yamauchi's approval, R&D 1 finalized a deal with Citizen on September 1, 1987. However, as Citizen's representatives left Nintendo's offices, they saw Sharp's team arriving for a meeting with Yamauchi. Without explanation, Yamauchi canceled the Citizen deal and awarded the contract to Sharp. To soften the blow, R&D 1 fabricated a story telling Citizen they were interested in buying color screens the next year, even drafting fake project documents. Citizen later supplied color screens for Sega's Game Gear, which had a design closely resembling Nintendo's fake project. Citizen never admitted to sharing the design. Near cancellation. The R&D 1 team soon discovered that Sharp was unprepared to make the screens they needed, leading to months of delays. Early prototypes with low-quality, twisted pneumatic screens sparked internal skepticism, with some employees mockingly referring to the project as dame game, with dame meaning hopeless in Japanese. In the summer of 1988, R&D 1 presented the prototype to Yamauchi, who immediately canceled the project, citing the poor visibility of the display. Team members argued that minor screen adjustments or a slightly higher budget could resolve the issue, but Yamauchi refused, leading them to suspect other teams had already convinced him the device would be a commercial failure. Furthermore, with the NES still thriving and the SNES on the horizon, a Game & Watch successor was no longer seen as essential. Most of R&D 1, including Okada, was reassigned. However, Yokoi remained committed to the project. Defying Yamauchi's decision, he continued refining the display. During the discussions with a Sharp director involved in the Game & Watch, the team learned of a super twisted pneumatic display secretly in development. While it had a green tint and slightly lower contrast, it dramatically improved the viewing angle. Yokoi devised a plan. In a meeting with a Sharp board member, he pressed them about new technologies, leading them to reveal the STN display. R&D 1 secured a prototype and installed it in the Game Boy. 3 months after canceling the project, Yamauchi was shown the STN prototype. Though still unimpressed by the screen, he approved the console for sale, perhaps influenced by delays in SNES development, which was now 2 years away from launch. Using STN display significantly increased production costs. To mitigate the expenses, the team reduced the screen size, though it was too late in development to shrink the console's overall dimensions. The target price of 10,000 yen was ultimately not met due to the cost of the display, and the Game Boy would retail for 12,500. To enhance the perceived value of the project, Yamauchi decided to include headphones and 4 AA batteries in the box, which cost Nintendo very little but made the Game Boy appear like a better deal. Launch and success. On January 17, 1989, Nintendo officially announced the Game Boy. It launched in Japan April 21st, selling out its initial production run of 300,000 units within the first 2 weeks. By August, sales had reached 720,000 consoles and 1.9 million games across just 4 launch titles. The Game Boy debuted in North America on July 31, 1989, at a retail price of $89.99, backed by a $20 million marketing campaign aimed at making it a must-have, hard-to-find holiday toy. On its release date, 40,000 units were sold, and within just a few weeks, sales reached 1 million. Learning from one of the NES launch's shortcomings, Okada pushed to offer third-party developers a development manual and development kit developed by Intelligent Systems to encourage software creation for the Game Boy. Meanwhile, R&D 1 developed Super Mario Land as the console's flagship title. But another game captured the attention of Okada and Yokoi, Tetris. While a team within R&D 1 was porting the Soviet-made puzzle game to the NES, they recognized its potential for a handheld platform. Although the Game Boy version of Tetris would not be ready for the console's Japanese debut, it was completed in time for the North American launch in July of 1989. Hank Rogers, who had acquired the rights to Tetris, convinced Nintendo of America president Minoru Arakawa to make it a pack-in game with the Game Boy instead of Super Mario Land, arguing that while Mario primarily appealed to young boys, Tetris would appeal to everyone. As a result, Tetris was bundled with the Game Boy in every region except Japan. Hardware: the Game Boy uses a custom system on a chip to house most of the components, named DMG CPU by Nintendo, and the LR35902 by its manufacturer, the Sharp Corporation. The display is a 2.5-inch reflexive, super twisted pneumatic monochrome liquid crystal display, measuring 47 millimeters wide by 43 millimeters high, with a resolution of 160 pixels wide by 144 pixels high in a 10 by 9 aspect ratio. The screen displays 4 shades of green/gray. The Game Boy's physical controls include a D-pad or directional pad, 4 action buttons, labeled A, B, select and start, a sliding power switch with a cartridge lock to prevent accidental removal, along with volume and contrast dials on either side of the device. The original Game Boy was powered internally by 4 AA batteries. For extended use, an optional AC adapter or rechargeable battery pack can be connected via a coaxial power connector on the left side. The right side also has a Game Link cable port for connecting up to 4 Game Boy devices for multiplayer games or data transfer. For sound output, the Game Boy includes a single monaural speaker and a 3.5mm headphone jack that offered stereo sound. Games: more than 1,000 games were released for the Game Boy, excluding canceled and unlicensed games. Additionally, more than 300 games developed for the Game Boy Color were backward compatible with the monochrome Game Boy models. Games are stored on cartridges called Game Boy Game Paks, using read-only memory ROM chips. Initially, due to limitations of the 8-bit architecture of the device, ROM size was limited to 32 kilobytes. However, Nintendo overcame this limitation with a memory bank controller inside the cartridge. The chip sits between the processor and the ROM chips. The CPU can only access 32 kilobits at a time, but the MBC can switch between several banks of 32 KB ROM. Using this technology, Nintendo created Game Boy games that used up to 1 megabyte of ROM. Game Paks could also provide additional functionality to the Game Boy system. Some cartridges included up to 128 kilobytes of RAM to increase performance, which could also be battery packed to save progress when the handheld was off. Real-time clock chips could keep track of time even when the device was off, and Rumble Pack cartridges added vibration feedback to enhance the gameplay. The top-selling franchise for the Game Boy were Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow, the first installments of the Pokémon video game series, which sold more than 46 million copies. The best-selling single game was Tetris, with more than 35 million copies shipped, It was the pack-in game included with the purchase of many original Game Boy devices. Beyond the platform's official titles, as of 2025, an active online community continues to create new games for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color through tools like GB Studio, a free and user-friendly game-building engine that simplifies the process compared to manual coding. Launch titles. When the Game Boy launched in Japan in April 1989, it featured 4 launch titles: Alleyway, a breakout clone; Baseball, a port of the NES game; Super Mario Land, an adaptation for the Mario franchise for handheld formats; and Yakuman, a Japanese mahjong game. When the console debuted in North America, 2 additional launch titles were added: Tetris and Tennis, which was another NES port, while Yakuman never saw a wide international release. Reception. Though it was less technologically advanced than the Game Gear, Atari Lynx, NEC, TurboExpress, and other competitors, notably by not supporting color, the Game Boy's lower price along with the longer battery life made it a success. The console received mixed reviews from critics. In a 1997 year-end review, a team of 4 Electronic Gaming Monthly editors gave the Game Boy scores of 7.5, 7, 8, and 2. The reviewer who contributed the 2 panned the system due to its monochrome display and motion blur, while his 3 co-reviewers praised its long battery life and strong games library, as well as the sleek, conveniently sized design of the new Game Boy Pocket model. Sales. The Game Boy launched in Japan April 21, 1989, with an initial shipment of 300,000 units, which sold out within 2 weeks. In the United States, 40,000 units were sold on its release day, July 31, 1989, and sales reached 1 million within weeks. By 1995, Nintendo of America reported that 46% of Game Boy players were female, a higher proportion than that of the NES and Super NES. Before the introduction of the Game Boy Color, over 59.89 million units of the various monochrome Game Boy models had been sold worldwide as of the 30th of September 1997. Nintendo subsequently reported only combined sales figures for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. By the time of the system's discontinuation in 2003, the monochrome Game Boy models and Game Boy Color had sold a combined total of 118.69 million units globally, 32.47 million in Japan, 44.06 million in the Americas, and 42.16 million in other regions. At the time of its discontinuation, the Game Boy line was the best-selling game console of all time. It later surpassed by the Nintendo DS, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo Switch, making it the 4th best-selling console as of 2025. By '97, the Game Boy and Game Boy Pocket had sold over 64 million units worldwide. Combined lifetime sales of the Game Boy and Game Boy Color models reached approximately 118.69 million units worldwide by the time of its discontinuation. Cultural legacy. Beyond its commercial success, the Game Boy has had a lasting cultural impact. It helped popularize handheld gaming through an affordable, durable design that brought video games into daily life. The system is frequently cited in retrospectives as a gateway to gaming for a generation of players. Smithsonian Magazine describes the Game Boy as a permanent fixture of American cultural history, citing its economic significance and enduring appeal. Reflections in The Guardian characterize it as a portal to other magical worlds, with players recalling formative gaming experiences. An original 1989 Game Boy is on display at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History as part of the American Enterprise exhibition, alongside early mobile devices. It is also featured in Nintendo Museum in Kyoto, Japan. In 2009, the Game Boy was inducted into the U.S. National Toy Hall of Fame. The Game Boy has become a staple within the chiptune scenes as hardware for composing music through a homebrew music tracker, such as Little Sound DJ and Nano Loop. Lego created a set based on the Game Boy in partnership with Nintendo. The set came out in October 2025. Super Mario Land is a 2D action-adventure platform game for the Game Boy, first released as a launch title in 1989. It is the first Super Mario game released for a handheld console and the fifth entry in the series. In Japan, it is recognized as the fourth. Unlike previous installments, the game was not developed by Shigeru Miyamoto and Nintendo EAD, but by Nintendo R&D 1, with Gunpei Yokoi as guiding producer. Super Mario Land takes place in Sarasa Land rather than the Mushroom Kingdom, and introduces Princess Daisy, a new character serving as the damsel in distress in place of Princess Peach. Tatanga, a malevolent alien with mesmeric powers, serves as both the main antagonist and final boss. In addition to being the first of the 3 Super Mario Land games, this game is also the shortest, comprising of only 12 levels spanning 4 different worlds. It was succeeded by Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins, which introduced Wario, and Wario Land Super Mario Land 3, which is also the first installment in the Wario Land series. Super Mario Land and its sequel were initially excluded from the main Super Mario series, but they were later included alongside the more traditional games in material for the Super Mario Bros. 30th anniversary and Super Mario Bros. 35th anniversary, as well as the history pages on the Mario Portal and Official Home of Mario websites. This game is notable for its inclusion of different or unrelated enemies and sound effects compared to traditional titles. Additionally, though the game did not receive critical acclaim, mainly due to its graphical capabilities and shortness in length, it sold extremely well, eventually totaling over 18 million copies sold, making it the 4th best-selling game for the Game Boy overall. The game was re-released for Nintendo 3DS's Virtual Console in 2011, and for the Game Boy Nintendo Classics for the Nintendo Switch in 2024 in celebration of the Game Boy's 25th anniversary. The Virtual Console release requires 42 blocks of memory to be installed. Story: the following is taken directly from the instruction booklet. Once upon a time, there was a peaceful world called Sarasa Land. In this world, there were 4 kingdoms named Birabuto, Muda, Easton, and Chai. One day, the skies of Sarasa Land were suddenly covered by a huge black cloud. From a crack in this cloud, the unknown space monster Tatanga emerged to try to conquer Sarasa Land. Tatanga hypnotized the people of all the kingdoms so that he could control them in a way he liked. In this way, he took over Sarasa Land. Now he wants to marry Princess Daisy of Sarasa Land to make her his queen. Mario came to know of these events, and he has started on a journey to the Chai Kingdom where Princess Daisy is held captive in order to restore peace to Sarasa Land. Can Mario defeat Tatanga, release the people from his hyperstellar hypnosis, and rescue Princess Daisy? It's all up to you and Mario's skill. Go for it, Mario! In this game, Mario is tasked with saving Princess Daisy and the inhabitants of Sarasa Land from Tatanga. To do so, he must travel across and conquer all 4 kingdoms: the Birabuto Kingdom, a desert kingdom based on ancient Egypt; the Muda Kingdom, an aquatic kingdom; the Easton Kingdom, a kingdom partially based on Easter Island; and the Chai Kingdom, a kingdom inspired by mythical ancient China. The first 3 kingdoms are each guarded by a boss Mario must defeat to rescue an enemy disguised as Princess Daisy. These three kingdoms are held by the Gao-like King Totomesu, Urarenbu like Dragon Zamasu, and Toko Toko like Hayoihoi. A cloud known as Boikinten is fought in the fourth kingdom. In the end, Mario must board the Sky Pop to battle and defeat Tatanga himself in his heavily armored airship, Pagasu. After he is defeated, Mario rescues Daisy and the two ride off together in a spaceship. It is revealed in the sequel, Super Mario Land 2: 6 Golden Coins, that Wario took advantage of these events in the game to take over Mario's castle. In this game, Tatanga guards the Golden Coin, presumably working under Wario. Gameplay. As a side-scrolling platform game, Super Mario Land is similar in gameplay to the original Super Mario Bros. As Mario, the player advances to the end of the level by moving to the right and jumping across platforms to avoid enemies and pitfalls. The screen only scrolls to the right as the player advances, but will not scroll back to the left, and sections of a level that have passed off-screen cannot be revisited. Mario travels to Sarasa Land to save Princess Daisy from Tatanga, an evil spaceman. 2 of the game's 12 levels are forced scrolling, Gradius-style shooters where Mario helms a submarine or an airplane and fires projectiles toward oncoming enemies, destructible blocks, and bosses. Levels end with a platforming challenge to reach an alternative exit located above the regular exit, the former leading to a bonus minigame styled after Ghost Leg Lottery that awards 1 to 3 extra lives or a Super Ball Flower power-up. Most of the bosses can either be beaten via physical attack or by jumping on a switch behind the boss. Collecting 100 coins earns Mario an extra life, and if he manages to earn 100,000 points, he gains an extra continue to use in the event all lives are lost. Mario is vulnerable as Small Mario. When he gets a Super Mushroom, he grows slightly in size and is able to take damage once without losing a life, instead reverting back to his small state. If Mario collects a Super Ball Flower, he becomes Super Ball Mario, and is able to shoot Super Balls at his enemies. If Mario happens to find and collect a star, he becomes invincible, and is able to defeat any enemy just by touching it. These effects are temporary and last only a short time. At the end of every non-boss level, the player reaches a gold tower with 2 entrances. The lower entrance takes Mario directly to the next stage, while the upper entrance sends him to a bonus game for a chance to win a Super Ball Flower or 1, 2, or 3 extra lives. After the main game is beaten, the mushroom icon on the title screen changes to an icon of Mario's head. This allows the player to play through the game once more, with additional enemies spread throughout the levels, though no further changes occurred to increase the difficulty. Beating this game unlocks a level selection option. As the game has no battery backup, the title screen reverts to the standard version upon switching the Game Boy off, resetting the game, or having the batteries run out. Unlike other games in the series, Super Mario Land features several differences that set it apart from the traditional Super Mario premises. Rather than being set in the Mushroom Kingdom, it is set in Sarasa Land, and drawn in line art. Mario rescues Princess Daisy in her debut, rather than the series' standard damsel in distress, Princess Peach. When jumped on, Koopa Troopa shells explode after a short delay. Mario throws black bouncing balls rather than fireballs, referred to as Super Balls in the manual. 1-up power-ups are depicted as hearts, and the level end flagpoles are replaced with platforming challenges. Compared to Super Mario Bros., which contains 32 levels subdivided into 8 worlds with 4 levels each, Super Mario Land is substantially smaller, with 12 levels subdivided into 4 worlds with 3 levels each. There are 5 unique bosses, one at the end of each of the 4 worlds, and a 5th and final boss being Tatanga, who appears when the 4th boss is defeated. The first 3 bosses may be destroyed with projectiles, or the player may move past them to the exit without destroying them first. The last level has no regular exit, and the 2 bosses at the end of that level must be destroyed with projectiles to complete the level and the game. Few elements reoccur from the previous Mario games, such as blocks suspended in mid-air, moving platforms that must be used to traverse pitfalls, pipes that lead to other areas, collectible coins that grant an extra life when 100 are collected, and Goomba enemies. After the player has completed the game, they may play through again on a harder mode, in which the levels are the same apart from the enemies being more numerous. If the player completes the harder mode, the game allows the player to start another play on any level of the game. Development and release. Development of Super Mario Land began in the second half of 1988 and lasted between 6 to 9 months. It was developed by Nintendo R&D 1 and published by Nintendo as a launch game for its Game Boy handheld console. Nintendo CEO Hiroshi Yamauchi believed that fun games promote console sales, so when the company created the Game Boy, he wanted a fun game featuring Nintendo's mascot, Mario. The task came to Nintendo R&D 1, a development team led by Game Boy inventor Gunpei Yokoi. Yokoi had previously created the Game & Watch series and worked with his protege Shigeru Miyamoto on the game that introduced Mario, Donkey Kong. Super Mario Land is the 4th Super Mario game, the first portable Mario game, and the first in the series to be made without Miyamoto. Absent Miyamoto's direction, the development team used elements new and inconsistent with the series, as Super Mario Land shrunk elements of the series to fit the portable device's small screen. Yokoi, the head of R&D 1, served as producer, and Satoru Okada served as director. They had previously developed Metroid and Kid Icarus together, and the two subsequently designed the Game Boy, Yokoi on its industrial design and Okada on its engineering. The Super Mario Land was planned as the portable console's showcase title until Hank Rogers brought Tetris to Nintendo of America and convinced Miraru Arakawa that the addictive computer game would help Nintendo reach the largest audience. The company subsequently chose to bundle Tetris with every Game Boy purchase. The Game Boy was released in Japan April 1989, North America in July, and Europe in September of 1990, and Super Mario Land became a launch game. Its official first release was April 21, 1989 in Japan, and its North American release followed on August 1st. On June 6, 2011, Super Mario Land was released for the Nintendo 3DS Virtual Console as one of the first titles for the service. Its new features included an increased size and an optional shades of green color palette to match the effect of the original Game Boy's monochrome. The game was re-released on Nintendo Classics service for Nintendo Switch May 15, 2024. Reception. Many critics saw Super Mario Land as a smaller and shorter version of Super Mario Bros. At the time of its release in 1989, reviewers were excited to have a portable Mario game. Paul Rand of Computer and Video Games called the game an arcade machine in your pocket, and the graphics remarkable for their size. French games magazine Player One said that Super Mario Land adequately compromised where necessary to bring Mario to a portable device. Electronic Gaming Monthly's Steve Harris considered the game fantastic and very fun to play, though short. Ed Semrand and Don Newart of the same outlet both declared Super Mario Land easily the best Game Boy cart of the time. One reviewer in Famitsu wrote that it has the best of the first game's release for the Game Boy. Tony Mott of Superplay said that the game proved that Nintendo's Game Boy had playability to match its competitors. Matt Reagan of Mean Machines agreed. Playability to the nth degree. British magazines Mean Machines and The Games Machine both commented on the many secrets to find. Player One, too, complimented the music. Player One further pronounced Super Mario Land a masterpiece, the pinnacle of portable video gaming. 3 reviewers in Famitsu were not enthusiastic about the graphics, describing them as blurry, less appealing than the Famicom Mario games, as it was monochrome. One reviewer felt that although the game was short, it was probably better that way due to the nature of the Game Boy. Sales. Following the Game Boy's overnight success, Super Mario Land became the second best-selling 1989 release in North America, behind the bundled Tetris. In the United States, the game topped Babbage's Game Boy sales charts for 2 months in 1992, from August to September. Super Mario Land went on to sell more than 25 million copies, making it the 4th best-selling game for the console. The game also outsold Super Mario Bros. 3, the best-selling standalone, non-bundled game on the NES home console. Legacy. The game began a Super Mario Land series of portable Mario games. Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, added a non-linear overworld and introduced Villain Wario, an evil version of Mario. The subsequent Wario Land Super Mario Land 3 began the Wario franchise. After 19 years, the 2011 game Super Mario 3D Land for the Nintendo 3DS became Mario's first game in stereoscopic 3D. Audrey Drake of IGN argued that both Wario Land and Super Mario 3D Land are not legitimate sequels, and wrote that the latter seems more like Super Mario Bros. 3 with Mario Galaxy influences than a successor to Super Mario Land 2. The Super Ball Flower appears in Super Mario Maker 2 as an unlockable power-up item, usable only in the Super Mario Bros. Style. Super Mario Land is remembered for its miniaturized Super Mario elements and twist on just about every Mario mainstay imaginable. Many of its new elements do not recur later in the series, making Super Mario Land strange compared to the rest of the series, or what IGN's Thomas described as a singular oddball. IGN's Mark Nix said retrospectively that Super Mario Land was the only uninspired Mario game, with funky voids of white and UFOs instead of the strikingly original Mushroom Kingdom. Mean Machines was also put off by the alien theme, easy difficulty, and dot matrix screen blur. IGN's Travis Foz wrote that the game was comparatively not as ambitious as Super Mario Bros. 3. Mean Machines said that it was not a true Mario game, not worth its originally high review score, and in retrospect, not really a classic. Glenn Fox of Nintendo Life agreed, writing that it was impressive achievement at the time, but did not age as well as other Mario games. Eurogamer's Schilling wrote that Mario felt different, lighter with more friction, and that the game felt radical and distinctive for the risks that it took. IGN's Thomas cited out-of-place gameplay elements like shooter levels, exploding Koopa shells, non-extinguishing fireballs, and non-Princess Peach plot as departures from the series. Thomas attributed this to Mario creator Miyamoto's lack of involvement in the game's development, which he described as famously hands-off. Schilling of Eurogamer instead blamed the Game Boy's technical limitations. But he too was perplexed by the new Sphinx, Seahorse, and Moai head enemies, and considered the exploding Koopa shells as a cruel trick, disdainful of the series' core gameplay. Super Mario Land's shooter levels, new to the series were not revisited in subsequent Super Mario games, except the Maker games. Subsequent series games such as Super Mario Land 2 both dropped the original tiny scale and chose the classic Fire Flower fireballs over the first installment's bouncing balls. The game was included in multiple rankings of top Game Boy games, and Official Nintendo Magazine listed it at 73 of its top 100 Nintendo games. After her debut in Super Mario Land, Princess Daisy appears in later Mario series sports and racing games. This original gray brick version of the Game Boy is the same one that I had growing up. I also had a homemade zipper case for it that my grandmother had made with 4 sewn-in pockets to hold some games. The reason I chose Super Mario Land over Link's Awakening to play is because I actually had Super Mario Land, and I did not have Link's Awakening. The first level song has a permanent space in my brain. There's actually a home video of me as a child being super excited about getting batteries as a gift for Christmas, even though that wasn't the main part of the gift. As any older millennial can tell you, some of the best toys needed batteries. And I also had the Game Light attachment, which used another 4 batteries. So with the 4 batteries needed for the Game Boy itself, I needed 8 total batteries to play at night or during long road trips. The light brick usually caused a glare on the screen, since the tiny lights were so close to it, so a book light worked better anyway. Total build time, 1 hour, 2 minutes, 8 seconds, which means you could watch half of the film Tetris with a total time of 118 minutes. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Remember to like, subscribe, share, ring that bell, all the things for the YouTubes. Thank you.